Have you ever found yourself holding on to a losing stock, just hoping it'll bounce back, even when you kind of knew there were way better places for your money? Or what about selling a winner way, way too early? It feels totally irrational, doesn't it? Well, it turns out there's a powerful, deep-seated reason for all of this, so let's get right into it. This right here, this is one of the most important ideas in all of finance. And it's a feeling every single one of us knows. Think about it. Finding a 100 rupee note on the street feels good, right? But losing a 100 rupee note? Oof, that feeling is just so much stronger, so much more potent. Today, we're going to figure out exactly why that is. And look, this isn't just a vague feeling. It is measurable. Nobel Prize-winning research has actually shown that on average, the psychological pain of losing money is about 2.5 times more powerful than the pleasure of gaining that exact same amount. Just let that sink in. 2.5 times. This isn't some small little quirk in our thinking. It is a massive emotional multiplier. So, this pain multiplier is really the heart of a behavioral bias that we call loss aversion. You can think of it like a glitch in our mental operating system, one that systematically distorts our financial judgment, pushing us to make some pretty bad decisions, not because we're not smart, but simply because we're human. And the really crucial thing to get here is that this is not pop psychology. This comes from foundational work in behavioral economics. This bias is the invisible force behind some of the most common mistakes investors make, like, refusing to sell a losing stock, because actually admitting that loss, it's just too painful. So the big question is, why does our brain do this to us? Well, to understand that, we need to kind of pop the hood and look at our mind's internal calculator. Psychologists call it the value function, and it explains this weird phenomenon where we process gains and losses in two totally different ways. The value function is basically the mental map our brain uses to weigh different outcomes. And it's not a straight line, it's a curve. And the shape of that curve tells us everything about our irrational choices. The key piece of the puzzle here is that everything is relative to a reference point. Okay, so check this out. It's like we have two completely different financial personalities. When we're thinking about gains, we're in the gains domain, we become super cautious, we're risk-averse, we want to lock in that sure win. But the second we're faced with a loss, our behavior completely flips. We suddenly become risk-seeking. We're willing to roll the dice just to avoid the pain of that loss. Let's see this in action. I'll put you in the hot seat. In this classic experiment, most people, they choose option A. They take the guaranteed 500 bucks. And it makes sense, right? We're in the gains domain. We prefer that certainty, the bird in the hand mindset. But just watch what happens when we change the starting point. Now you start with 2,000 rupees, and most people suddenly jump to option B. They take the gamble. Faced with a certain loss, they become risk seekers, hoping to get back to where they started, even if it means risking a much bigger loss. And here is the kicker. Get this. In both scenarios, you end up with either 1,500 rupees for sure, or a 50-50 shot at 1,000 or 2,000. The final outcomes are identical. The only thing that changed was the starting reference point, whether we framed the choice as a potential gain or as avoiding a loss. It just proves our decisions aren't based on pure logic, but on our emotional reaction to the frame. All right, let's keep going. Now we'll see how this bias builds into something else, something really powerful. See, loss aversion doesn't just apply to abstract numbers. It gets really sticky with things we actually own, creating what we call the ownership trap. This is the endowment effect, and it's simple. As soon as something becomes yours, your brain's loss aversion kicks into high gear. The idea of losing that thing becomes way more painful. For an investor, this means the stock that's already in your portfolio feels way more valuable than the exact same stock you don't own, which makes it incredibly hard to sell, even when you probably should. A super simple experiment proves this beautifully. They gave one group of students a coffee mug. When asked how much they'd sell it for, the average price was around 500 rupees. But another group of students, who didn't have mugs, were only willing to pay about 200 rupees to buy one. That huge gap you see there, that's the extra value that mere ownership created in their minds. It's wild. And this isn't just about coffee mugs, right? In your portfolio, this thing shows up everywhere. You won't sell that stock your grandfather left you. You get attached to a stock that's been a big winner. You hold on to a loser because you've put so much research into it. And, oh man, the ESOP trap is a classic, where employees hold a dangerous amount of their company's stock just because it feels like their company. Okay, so it sounds like we're just wired to make these mistakes. We feel losses deeply, we overvalue what we own. Are we doomed? Absolutely not. The key isn't to fight your emotions head on. That's a losing battle. Instead, we can use specific mental models to reframe the situation and short circuit the bias. Think of this as your practical toolkit for breaking free. The whole idea is to reset that faulty reference point your brain is using. So instead of being anchored to the past, like what you paid for a stock, this process forces you to make a decision based only on its future prospects. We have all been there. This is the little voice of loss aversion in your head. Your brain is totally anchored to your purchase price, and the thought of making that 300 rupee loss real, it's just too painful. So you do nothing. You're paralyzed. Now, here's the reframe. This one question is like a magic trick for your brain. It mentally converts that stock back into cash, which completely breaks the endowment effect. It forces you to look at the investment on its current merits, not its past performance. And if the answer is no, then you know you're only holding on because of loss aversion. And here's the other side of that coin, the fear of future regret. This is just another flavor of loss aversion, the fear of losing out on potential gains. This fear can keep you stuck in a mediocre investment for years. And this reframe helps you zoom out. It pits one potential regret against another. By focusing on the long-term opportunity cost, you can often see that the real risk isn't missing a small rebound in a bad stock, it's missing out on a truly great investment somewhere else entirely. Now, mental reframing is powerful, but it takes conscious effort every single time. And let's be honest, on a bad day, our willpower fails. That's why the most successful investors don't really rely on willpower. They build systems that make the rational decision the automatic one. These are what you call pre-commitment strategies. The idea is you decide on the rules of the game before your emotions have a chance to get involved. Setting a stop-loss rule forces you to sell at a pre-decided point. A rebalancing schedule forces you to trim winners and add to losers, period. These systems bypass your emotional brain and let your rational brain stay in the driver's seat. This is just a fantastic example of a system designed to fight that endowment effect. Once a year, you force yourself to rank everything you own based only on its future potential. Then you just mechanically sell the weakest performers and plow that money back into your best ideas. It's a systematic way to make sure your portfolio is always optimized for the future, not stuck in the past. And all this brings us to the final and I think most crucial takeaway. It's a paradox, but it is absolutely true. By accepting that small losses are just an inevitable part of investing, they're the cost of doing business, you free yourself from the fear that causes those really catastrophic ones. You end up making smarter, quicker, more rational decisions, and in the long run, you actually come out ahead. The goal isn't to stop feeling loss, but to build the mindset and the systems to make sure that feeling never gets to make the final call.